Hi, I'm Ian Patrick. Welcome to my channel. And tonight I'm going to be doing my first movie review of all time. I'm only going to be doing classic films on my channel. Classic films just have a special place in my heart ever since I was a little kid. My father actually introduced classic movies to me at a young age, and I've been hooked ever since. Tonight I'm going to be reviewing the film The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, starring the great Gregory Peck. The leading lady is Jennifer Jones. Fredric March is the supporting actor, and also there's an appearance of Lee J. Cobb in this movie, who most people would recognize from The Exorcist. Now, the first thing that I noticed while watching this film was actually in the credits, the opening credits, and it was that the animations are very, very similar to the animations in the hit show Mad Men, as seen on AMC. I'm actually not a huge fan of the show. Don't ask me why I have the DVD set, but there were actually quite a few similarities between the two. In fact, I'm very certain that the people who created Mad Men took a lot from the Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. For example, as I mentioned, the animations were practically the same. The suit that Gregory Peck actually wears is virtually the same that Don Draper wears in the show. Uh, and also just the fact that both work on Madison Avenue as ad men. They work for advertisement companies, so it's it's basically a 1950s version of Mad Men. So if you liked watching the show Mad Men, then you would definitely love watching The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. Now, enough about Mad Men, and let's see, the plot of the movie. My channel isn't going to be, giving summaries. It's mainly going to be me pointing out things that I liked or disliked about films and telling you to look out for certain things when you watch these movies. Um, the plot is basically Gregory Peck's character has come back from fighting in World War II, and he's just dealing with coming back to reality of being a family man and supporting his wife and kids, and finding a job and supporting them, and just Jennifer Jones is she plays quite the annoying wife who wants him to further himself and basically make more money for them. And it's real interesting watching Gregory Peck overcome this. He does have flashbacks in the film of fighting in World War II, and it's definitely worth mentioning that uh, these scenes of World War II and when he's over there in Europe fighting and even in Japan are very ahead of its time, I would say. Usually in the 1940s, the war films were meant to motivate the young men and women to help uh, the military and just to enlist and do things like that. However, in this film, it shows the much darker side of the war. For example, it deals with killing young men. There's a scene where Gregory Peck has to take the life of a young Nazi, and usually, when you think of Nazis, you think of the Nazis in uh, Indiana Jones films, the evil Nazi. Whereas in this film, it showed that there were a lot of Nazis that were young men, and it was just sad taking their lives. Another thing it deals with is cheating on wives that were back in the U.S. during the war. And I won't give away too much, but let's just say Gregory Peck does have a love affair when he's in Italy. And another thing that the movie shows is just losing your sanity during the war. I know a lot of movies had already done this, but there's a scene where Gregory Peck is in Japan fighting, and it's pretty powerful seeing how far these soldiers went and just lost their mind in the process. Now, another, I mentioned that this film is kind of a post-war themed, and it's worth mentioning that Fredric March, who is also in the film, a great actor, in my opinion, one of the best actors of that time. Fredric March had already been in The Best Years of Our Lives, which won the Academy Award, and uh, that movie is also worth seeing. Please see it if you haven't seen it. It deals with post-war and just post-war problems, so that's worth mentioning. I would actually recommend you to see that film before seeing this one, and maybe I'll review that movie in a later video. But the actors, Gregory Peck, everybody knows Gregory Peck, hopefully, who's watching this channel. You know, Atticus Finch and many, many other great films. He's one of my favorite actors. He delivered very well this film. He has one of the greatest voices, in my opinion, in movie history. Delivered his lines very well. Fredric March was the also star of the film. He was the very convincing boss of the ad company that he worked for, and he was very pathetic because, well, I'll get to it. But Jennifer Jones, this was actually the first film that I've ever seen Jennifer Jones in. She is actually from my hometown, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I didn't care for her that much. Uh, Maybe you'll like her. She did do a good job at playing kind of the annoying wife. Maybe that's what the director wanted her to do, but she's definitely the different leading lady. She's not exactly your common Hollywood beauty, but she was pretty good. You know, she didn't ruin the film or anything like that. But I actually have a book here. It is a book about the biography of David Selznick, and the reason why I have this is because well, she married David Selznick. Excuse me. And here you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but she was also in Duel in the Sun with Gregory Peck. That was their first film that they had together, and that was not too many years before this film. And I wanted to read actually uh, what the director of The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit had to say to David O. Selznick, because apparently David O. Selznick just wouldn't get out of the director's business about this film. And the director, Nunnally Johnson, found an exquisite way of putting David in his place. He said, in case your wife is too modest to tell you, I want you to know that she did a scene today that was absolutely marvelous. P.S. Don't answer this. So basically, David O. Selznick just wouldn't stop messaging and wanting to know how the film was going, and the director basically told him to butt out. Anyways, moving on. Okay, the Fredric March scene. Now, in my reviews, I'm going to be talking about specific scenes that really captivated me and just really hit me. And in this film, it was the scene when Gregory Peck decides that he's going to go to his boss, Fredric March's office, and tell him that the speech that he has made is just, it stinks, that he needs to redo it. When Peck is in his office, Fredric March gets a phone call, and it's the press saying that his daughter had eloped and she had married someone that his wife and he had not really wanted her to marry, and his wife had actually already told him, don't bother ever talking or seeing me again if our daughter goes and marries this person. So you can just see the pain in Fredric March's face, and he is just such a convincing actor. It's very powerful, and you just feel sorry for him. He has all the money a man could want, and really he has no family, so he has no happiness. Now, after the phone call, he has to deal with listening to Gregory Peck uh, tell him about how his speech isn't that good. After all this is done, it goes well. Gregory Peck is, happy that he didn't lose his job telling his boss that his speech wasn't that good. And Fredric March looks at him and says, "Hey, would you be willing to have a drink with me, and will you sit down with me?" And Gregory Peck can just kind of see that this man is suffering, and it's just a real powerful scene. It's worth, when you see it, you might get the same chills as I get, because it seems so natural the way that they deliver their lines. It's almost like you forget that they're acting. It's really great. Now, I really like this film, but most films do have flaws, and in this film in particular, I think that the flaws were not that big. The main one was that the movie was a little bit too long. I think it could have been 2 hours, but it went to 2.5 hours. I think that they could have cut the fighting scenes in Japan out. There were some good things, Gregory Peck loses his mind a little bit when he's fighting in Japan, but I don't think it was too necessary to the film. And I also think there was a lot about they inherited an estate, and there's just a legal battle going over this estate. I don't think this was necessary for the film, but I'm sure they were trying to stay close to the actual novel, and it just went 30 minutes over. And I think if they cut these two parts out of the film, then it would have been great. Another thing I already mentioned is I didn't really care for Jennifer Jones too much. She did good, but I don't know. Personally, I would have preferred another leading lady. Now, all said and done, and at the end of all my reviews, I will be giving my own personal rating. It's going to be out of 4 stars. This film, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, I give 3.5 stars out of 4. That's pretty good for me. Usually I go lower than that. It's hard even to get 3 for me, but this film was almost perfect, but not quite there because of the flaws I mentioned. If there are any flaws, it's not going to get the 4 stars, but it's definitely worth seeing. I hope you liked my review. I'm going to be doing a lot more after every film that I see, and please write comments down below. I'll love to see them. They'll be my first comments, and yeah, have a good night, guys.